Okay. Okay. We're on, we're connected. Ready to start in a couple of minutes. Okay. Ready to start. Namo tassa bhagavato arahato sama sambuddhassa. Namo tassa bhagavato arahato sama sambuddhassa. Namo tassa bhagavato arahato sama sambuddhassa. So this is the final installment in the series on the Bojjanga. And today we're doing Upekkha, equanimity, which is the seventh Bojjanga and is one of the tranquilizing factors. Upekkha or equanimity is very central to the practice of Buddhism and meditation, and it comes up in a lot of different contexts. In one passage in the Visuddhimagga, there is a list of 10 kinds of equanimity. So it does have a lot of different contexts, and it has a slightly different nuance wherever it appears. One of the big distinctions to make, which sometimes causes confusion when it's not clearly understood, is that the word upekkha can refer to a sankhara, that is a mental formation, or to a vedana, a feeling. Well, there are two different aspects of upekkha. And if we go through this list of the 10 kinds of equanimity, we can see most of them are referring to the upekkha as a sankhara. The first one in the list is called six-factor equanimity, and it is specifically references the perfect equanimity of an arahant. 6 factors referring to the 6 sense bases. And an arahant has a perfect equanimity. The second one is equanimity as a divine abiding. This is one of the contexts in which equanimity comes up. That is as a Brahma Vihara. The 4 Brahma Viharas: metta, karuna, mudita, upekkha, loving kindness, compassion, sympathetic joy, and equanimity. And the first 3 are rather similar in, or you could say, variations on a theme, and upekkha stands alone, separate, because the first 3 Brahma Viharas are based on an aspiration. May beings be well and happy, may they be free of suffering, may they continue to enjoy the happiness they have found. Whereas there's none of this in equanimity. Equanimity is simply a recognition of the fundamental, the way in which beings are fundamentally the same. The traditional contemplation is that this being is just experiencing the results of its own karma, born of its karma, heir to its karma, abides supported by its karma. So obviously, when we consider the multitude of beings, human and non-human, they're all there are many differences between them. Every being is in some sense unique, but there's also a sense in which they're all the same, in that they're all experiencing the results of their karma. So equanimity as a divine abiding is to have a sense of this particular aspect in which beings are equal or the same, and to hold that forefront in the mind rather than focusing on the difference between beings. So that all beings, whether they're human or animal or dewa, near or far, great or small, whatever they may be, they're held with in the same attention, the same weight in the mind. That's equanimity as a divine abiding, which is equanimity directed towards beings. There's equanimity as the third one in this list, is equanimity as an enlightenment factor, as a Bojjanga, which is the main topic of this talk today. That is to hold a balance in the mind, to have an even keel in the mind, so that everything which arises is observed in a calm way, without letting the mind become either fascinated or terrified, just seeing things in their own nature as they are. Equanimity as energy, neither over lax nor over strenuous. So this is equanimity as the middle way, as a balance in the energy, and this is illustrated by the example of the musician Sona, who was a bhikkhu of the Buddha's time, who was having trouble with his meditation, and the Buddha advised him, and he spoke about balancing the energy, and he used the analogy of tuning his lute. He said, if you're tuning your lute and you wind the strings too tightly, what will happen? Well, the string will break. If you wind the string too loosely, what will happen? Then it won't make a good sound. So the art of properly tuning a lute is to find just that sweet spot where it's just tight enough and not overly tight. So it's the same with our meditation. The energy has to be firm and steady, but not erratic and stress inducing. So this is the equanimity as applied to energy. It's equanimity about formations, which is a particular stage in the development of insight meditation. It's the stage where the mind has passed through all kinds of turmoil and come out to a calm resting point. And it could be called the furthest point that one can reach by striving. You can from this place, this is not yet enlightenment, but enlightenment can only occur from this place. The mind is completely balanced, and the equanimity is perfect, so that or as close to perfect as possible, so that the meditator is not upset or distracted or fascinated or afraid, but just calmly observing whatever occurs in the mind. It's equanimity about formations. And number 6 is equanimity as a feeling, neither painful nor pleasant feeling, which is the case where equanimity is classed as a Vedana. Sometimes in the more technical literature, like the Abhidhamma, the state of neutral feeling is called adukkhama sukham, neither painful nor pleasant. I think to make the distinction clear between neutrality as a feeling tone and neutrality as a mental formation. Here we're talking with the feelings. When there are 3 categories of feelings: painful feelings, dukkha, pleasant feelings, sukha, and a neutral feeling, or upekkha. And upekkha is not, as a feeling, is not necessarily anything really special or spiritually advanced. Most of what we experience in ordinary life is neutral. If you're constantly being bombarded with impressions on the senses, and every time the mind contacts an external object through the senses, then a feeling tone is associated with it. It's either pleasant or painful or neutral. And I think most of the time, unless there's some very extraordinary circumstances, most of the time, if it were possible to keep a running total of your feelings moment by moment, I think at the end of the day, you'd find out that the vast majority of the feeling tones were neutral. Most things we contact with the senses are not impactful enough to cause either pleasure or pain. Number 7 is equanimity about insight, which is defined, quoting the Visuddhimagga, as neutrality about observation, what exists, what has become, that he abandons, and he obtains equanimity. So this is developing the skill of taking whatever arises in the mind in a neutral way and being able to observe it, but not to take hold of it. This is the skill of Vipassana, or insight meditation, is two aspects to it. One is that nothing should be missed, and the other is that nothing should be held on to. And that's difficult to do, because things that can arise in the mind, like old memories, for example, can have an emotional resonance, and we can get caught in them. So the skill is to develop this deep equanimity that just observes whatever is arising without a reaction, without letting it affect or change the tone or stream of the mind. Number 8 is equanimity as specific neutrality. That's a specific mode or aspect of upekkha, and the Pali for this is tatra majjhatata, which I think is a really great word. If you break it down, if you break the compound down, what it would literally mean is being in the middle about that, or the state of middleness about that. Tatra is that. It's an emphatic kind of adverb. So that's where the specific part of the neutrality comes in. And how this applies is that for development of deep insight, it's important that the neutrality or the equanimity be specific. And what we mean by this is that it's not good enough to just have a kind of general vague sort of calm, neutral feeling, but to be remain neutral no matter what occurs in the mind. So the object of consciousness at this moment is tatra, is that. And if you have tatra majatata, you're in the middle about that, meaning you're not going to extremes. You're not either repelled by it or attracted to it. You're not either afraid of it or desiring of it, but just in the middle, just observing it calmly and from a place of neutrality. So specific neutrality is a very important aspect of Upekkha that applies to development of insight. Number 9 is equanimity of jhana, impartiality towards even the highest bliss, as the Visuddhimagga says. And this here refers really to equanimity as a sankhara, because the jhanas, the first 3 jhanas, are associated with a pleasant feeling, pleasant vedana, piti and sukha. So you don't have upekkha as a vedana occurring in the first 3 jhanas, but you do have or the neutrality in the mind, in that there's a non-attachment. It's experienced without being clung to. So there's a neutrality about it. It's not the bliss experience in jhana is not something that the mind will find itself addicted to or attached to, if it has this neutrality. This is just another phenomenon. And the final one, number 10, is called the Purifying Equanimity. And this is the equanimity experienced in the 4th jhana. So it's equanimity both as a sankhara and a vedana. It's the mind has this purifying equanimity. And it's significant to observe that in both the samatha path, the jhanas, and in the vipassana or insight path, the highest stages are associated with equanimity. With equanimity about formation in the vipassana path, and equanimity as the feeling tone of 4th jhana. So this list of 10 is actually can be simplified. It's many of them kind of overlap and refer either to some aspect of insight neutrality, or to specific aspects of equanimity. So don't have to concern ourselves with the details of this list so much. I presented it for interest, but the key point to remember is that upekkha can be either a sankhara or a vedana, and it can be classified also depending on the object. Equanimity as a Brahma Vihara is equanimity applied to persons, to beings, whereas the deeper form of equanimity, that which is applied to all states, all phenomena, all dhammas, is the equanimity of insight, as tatra majatata. So when we're taking it in a general way, as a Bojjanga, which is actually one of the 10 in the list. It has this calming effect in the mind because the mind is not moved. You can think of equanimity as being sitting in a solid center point and not being pushed one way or the other. The ordinary mind that is weak in equanimity will swing back and forth between desire and fascination and attachment to pleasant states, and fear, loathing, and misery associated with unpleasant states. Whereas the mind with equanimity just sits in the middle and observes each thing as it arises without being reactive to it. Now, this is also to be remembered that, as I said, equanimity as a feeling tone is not necessarily spiritually advanced, and this is something to be careful of. That the equanimity that is spiritually positive is associated with energy and mindfulness. So the mind is bright and clear and clearly observant of phenomena, but is not affected or moved by them. There is also a lower form of equanimity that's associated with dullness. One is not reactive because one is not clearly observant. In Thailand, they call this water buffalo equanimity. Well, the equanimity of a dull beast. Well, the water buffalo is generally calm and placid, not because they're so wise, but because they're so dull. That it doesn't matter if flies are biting them or if it's raining or sunny, or they just non-reactive. And this has also been called tree stump equanimity. That it's the equanimity of dullness. So there is equanimity there in the sense of a feeling tone, but equanimity as a sankhara is completely absent, because if the mind is dull and it's not observant, then it will it will tend to be neutral because it's not being impacted by impressions. But if you're observant and awake and keen, you will be experiencing many internal and external phenomena. And equanimity is the practice of not being affected by that, but remaining in the middle. And this is really a very key point of practice to develop this higher wide awake equanimity. And it has this, it's associated here with the calming factors, because it keeps the mind on an even keel. The mind is not excited, and it allows the mind to remain steady. If the equanimous or neutral feelings are not observed with mindfulness, then that can lead to dullness and sleepiness and boredom. If the pleasant feelings are not observed with mindfulness, that leads to attachment and desire, and the unpleasant ones lead to fear and anger. But The neutral ones, if neutral phenomena are not clearly observed, then one tends to become dull and one can feel bored. You know? So the sense of being bored is a sign of not being keenly aware of neutral phenomena. Equanimity means treating all phenomena, every Dhamma that arises to the mind, with the same weight of attention. I like to say that the best rule of thumb for developing insight or vipassana is that nothing is so trivial that it can be ignored, and nothing is so important that it needs to be held on to. So this is a question of that fine balance, and the whole principle of equanimity or upekkha is a balancing act of being in the middle and walking that tightrope and not being swayed, not being pulled or pushed one way or the other, just walking along that tightrope one step at a time, one foot in front of the other, maintaining that perfect poise and balance. And when equanimity is strong, it's a very bright state of mind. It's also very peaceful, and it's calm, and it's pleasant in a way beyond sensual pleasantry. It's an abiding that is completely free of stress and tension. There's no pulling or pushing on the mind. It's that steady middle point. The Buddha talked often in different ways, different contexts, about the middle way, the middle path. And a lot of the Buddhist teaching and a lot of the skill in Buddhist practice is finding the middle and being steady in the middle, you know? And not going to extremes, not being pushed to one side or the other. That's why I like that Pali word for specific neutrality, tatra majjhatthata, being in the middle about that. I think it really has a very immediate, literal sense to the type of mind state we're striving for. Remaining in the middle, irregardless of what that is, whether it's something wonderful or something terrible or just something dull and prosaic, we remain in the middle. So I think that's enough on Upekkha for now, and I'll see what we got to deal with in the questions. I see there's all kinds of stuff in the chat already. I try not to be distracted by the chat while I'm talking, but I'll go in there now. I try not to be distracted by the chat while I'm talking, but I'll go in there now. Question: what is meant by seeing things as they are? That means seeing phenomena in their own nature, on their own terms, and not coloring them with our preconceptions or our preferences, but this phenomena just in its own nature, which is easier said than done, because ordinarily we layer on to our experience all kinds of both feelings and also thought formations. We have, and it's very difficult to get down to the actual bedrock of immediate experience. What is this phenomena right now? Not what I think about it, not what I feel about it, not how much I like it or how much I don't like it, but just as it is in its own nature. Okay, question. I missed last week's talk. Would you explain Samasamadhi in the context of Satipatthana? Chula Wadela Sutta and others describe Samasamadhi dependent on Satipatthana. It's kind of a big question and off topic for today, but I'll maybe say briefly about it. Samasamadhi as a path factor in this association with Satipatthana, which is meditation on mindfulness. You have to have a good samadhi in order to have mindfulness, because the samadhi is the stability or steadiness of the mind. So if you're going to observe phenomena, that has to be done from a place of steadiness and stability. So samadhi and sati are different factors, and they have a different emphasis, but they work together, and you really need to develop both. That's why they're both in the Eightfold Path. Another question. There seems to be several levels of Upekkha, with the ultimate Upekkha of an Arahant. Do you believe all these Bojjangas accrue over time, each one strengthening the others? Yes. Yeah. I mean, all of the Bojjangas can be experienced on deeper and deeper levels, become stronger and more impactful on the mind. And it's important to remember too the balancing of the Bojjangas, that the energizing factors need to be balanced with the calming factors. So as I said about water buffalo equanimity, that would be an example of the calming factors being preponderant, and the energizing factors of Dhamma, Vichaya, and Virya not being present. So the mind just sinks into dullness. The Buddha has also described neutral feeling as pleasant in Majjhima 59. Is that also why Nibbana, although without pleasure and pain, is described as the ultimate happiness? Yeah, sometimes the phrase is used, sukham param sukham, the happiness beyond happiness. And when we're talking about the pleasant experience of Upekkha or even of Nibbana, it's to be taken in a more poetic or figurative sense. It's not literally sukha vedana. It's not really technically, in the technical Abhidhamma sense, it's not pleasure, but it is pleasure in a more generalized sense. In a more generalized sense, you could say it's the highest pleasure. How can one maintain equanimity when unpleasant sensations just keep coming back again and again every day? Yeah, it's a challenge. That's the challenge of practice. One has to develop that over time. And this is where formal meditation really can help with the daily life, because meditation is, in a sense, it's an artificial environment you set up that it's where it's made as easy as possible. You minimize the external distractions, and you're just dealing with the internal mental state, which can be difficult enough and take some training to become equanimous and calm in the face of the mental states. Then you go out into the world and you're dealing not only with your own internal stuff, but with external phenomena that can be at times painfully impacting on you. But if you've learned some skill during the meditation, you can apply that in the life and remain equanimous even in the face of disagreeable experiences. You just remain in that neutral position and understand this is just a phenomena, and you see it in its own nature and you don't react to it. How stable or firm can the equanimities of a stream enterer be? Are they still liable to waver? Yeah, well, a stream winner, first stage of enlightenment, a stream winner or stream enterer, Sotapanna, has not yet overcome sensual desire or ill will. So their equanimity is far from perfect. They can be still swayed or waver. Now, they would have a better handle on that than a patujana or an unenlightened person, but not nearly as much as anagami or an arahant. A few weeks ago, you said that Upekkha can help overcome desire for praise. Could you please give some concrete exercises to overcome this need for approval? I don't know about a concrete exercise, except to when it occurs, when you receive praise or blame, to take that as an opportunity to practice, to try to maintain a neutral reaction to it, and see it just as a phenomena, you know? And the contents of the praise or blame could be taken as a learning opportunity. Now, if you're being praised for something you've done well, instead of giving way to attachment to that or excitement, to learn, well, yeah, okay, I did that well. That's good. And, you've learned something. Likewise with blame, it's even more educating, because you can say, okay, I've done something wrong. Now I can see what I've done. I think I have the equanimity of dullness. Is it too late for me? No, there's no eternal damnation in Buddhism. You can still pull yourself out of it. You should take the lesson of the 7 Bojjangas to heart. And if you find yourself really caught in this dullness, to never mind working on the calming factors for now. Concentrate on the 3 energizing factors. Get your energy up, investigate Dhammas, and try to find some joy and the piti, the kind of exciting joy of jhana. Can one say that the Buddha had a desire to help beings reduce their suffering? If so, how was this possible with his perfected equanimity? Well, the Buddha was his intention to reduce the suffering of beings was motivated by compassion, and it's quite clear about this. This was the motivating factor of why the Buddha decided to teach at all was karuna, or compassion. And that's possible, to have compassion and still be equanimous. In fact, the perfect karuna is associated with upekkha. And I think for many people misunderstand karuna and take it to be a kind of vicarious suffering. If you are aware of other beings suffering, if you have perfect karuna, that doesn't make you suffer. Um, it can motivate you to try and relieve the suffering if possible, but it's not motivated out of desire, and it doesn't come from a place of your own suffering, but a higher spiritual virtue of compassion, or karuna. Is seeing things in a non-dichotomist way that avoids extremes helpful in understanding upekkha? I'm not really completely sure what you mean by that. Certainly avoiding extremes is good, to try and remain in the middle. But you want to avoid, I think you want to also avoid kind of letting everything sort of mush together. That there are two aspects of wisdom that need to be both developed, both balanced. One is the discriminating wisdom, and one is the equalizing wisdom. With the discriminating wisdom, you see the difference between things. So you clearly see, this is big, this is small, this is a sankara, this is a vedana. You have that specificity there. Because dhammas are not all the same, beings are not all the same. But then there's the equalizing wisdom, which sees the underlying fundamental way in which all dhammas are the same. And this is particularly their emptiness, the voidness of all phenomena. Next question. Is it correct that finding mostly neutral feelings in the second satipatthana is associated with ignorance, or is there no such correlation? I don't think there's a complete correlation there. Ignorance and its association with neutral feeling, there is an association, but it's caused by not ignorance is enhanced, or one of the causes of ignorance is not being clearly aware of neutral feeling. But if the mind is really bright and clear, and see the mind of an arhat, there is no ignorance, but there's still equanimity, and the arhat would experience mostly or entirely neutral feeling, but there's no ignorance. So there's not really a direct one-to-one correspondence. But then there's, on the other end of the spectrum, there's the water buffalo equanimity. If you're very dull and ignorance is heavy, that can also be associated with neutral feeling. Upekkha as a vedana. So I don't think there's you can't make a generalization there. It depends on what other factors are present or not present. I am having a difficult time knowing if I have upekkha or indifference. Is there a difference, and if so, does it hinder practice? Well, the question to watch would be if you're clearly aware of a phenomena, or are you just ignoring them? If you're clearly aware of phenomena, with a bright, clear mind, sharply seeing the phenomena, but not reacting to them. That's upekkha. But if you're neutral or equanimous, because you're too dull to actually see the phenomena clearly, that's indifference. Okay, next one. Question: can practicing equanimity in seeing anicca, anatta, dukkha in worldly winds and letting them go unattachedly? Yes. Yeah, that's very good. The worldly winds or the worldly dhammas are external worldly phenomena. They're praise and blame, gain and loss, pleasure and pain, fame and dishonor. And one who is unwise is experiences life as kind of like a roller coaster. When you have the positive sides of these, the gain and the pleasure and praise, you're like really happy and going up, exhilarated, and then you get blamed and you experience pain and loss, then you totally thrown down. But if you see that all these things are marked by the three characteristics, as the questioner says, emptiness, impermanence, and unsatisfactoriness, then you can just let them winds blow by. You're not affected by them. Why does the body crave an object while the mind doesn't? It's as if the body has its own consciousness completely independent of the intellect. I'm not sure if that's even really true. If the craving occurs in the mind, it may be stimulated by the body. Um, the body can experience if the food is low, the body experiences hunger, but then the mind takes that physiological phenomena of hunger and turns it into craving. The body has a physiological reaction to different circumstances, but then the craving actually occurs in the mind. If, for example, if one were practicing fasting and hunger arose, if the person was a very strong meditator, very well developed, they would experience the physical sensation of hunger without it turning into craving for food. It would just be seen as a physiological response. Okay, next question. I would believe that a person incapable of attaining the first three Brahma Viharas could still develop equanimity. Would you agree with this? Well, it depends on what you mean by experiencing equanimity. Certainly they could in a lesser degree, but mastery of equanimity as a Brahma Vihara is more difficult than the other three. It's in the Visuddhimagga, it's treated almost like a graduate course. You said you have to develop jhana in one of the other three before you can really properly do equanimity as a Brahma Vihara. It is an entirely different plane than the others. The other three are associated with an aspiration. So they have this kind of limitation of being somewhat discontented with the phenomena as they occur. But the equanimity just observes what's present, whether it's painful or pleasant, and understands that's its nature. That's the way it is, without reacting in any way. I find mostly neutral feelings during Vipassana practice and wonder if I'm not able to discern the quality of Vedana. Are you saying that that is to be expected in general, having more neutral feeling? Yeah. If as the Vipassana deepens, you should have more and more equanimity, more and more neutral feeling. That's just to be expected. That's a sign of the mind calming down and coming to a center point. So there's nothing wrong with that. Do acts of generosity help in developing equanimity directly or indirectly? Yeah, they can, because they can develop selflessness or egolessness. So that tends towards equanimity. If one sense door is cut off, tongue cancer, does it open the other sense doors more? Yeah, that's probably generally true. Like, the example that's often talked about is someone who's blind, or becomes blind. Then they find their hearing and touch and smell become more acute to make up for it. Well, when we react to a feeling, are we giving ourselves more fuel for further rebirth? Is equanimity a way to end the reproduction of samsaric existence? It's not sufficient in itself. Just being equanimous is not sufficient, but it's a prerequisite. It's a way towards ending samsaric existence. Remember that equanimity about formations as a vipassana stage is the stage from which enlightenment can occur. So enlightenment only can occur with a mind that's solidly grounded in equanimity. And another thing I would say about that is pleasant and unpleasant feeling are in themselves not productive of karma or rebirth, because they're classified as resultants. They just occur in the mind. You're not really doing it. At the moment they occur, they're a resultant factor. But then, if the mind reacts to those feelings and becomes attached to the pleasant and repulsed by the unpleasant, then you're making fresh karma and you're sowing the seeds for future experience. Does past trauma through verbal bullying hinder one's progress in equanimity? It can make it more difficult. Certainly, any unpleasant experience that can make it more, or pleasant experience as well, can make it more difficult to find equanimity, but that's just something you have to work with. And you have to learn to let that go, not to dwell on it or allow that to move one from the center point. If it's a past trauma, you can reflect that it's not real anymore. It happened in the past, so it's no longer real. It's empty, it's void, and there's no reason to let it move one from the center point. You had said not to send metta to those who have passed on. So how can I send my father the wish that he finds meditation wherever he is? The proper way to help the deceased is to make merit, do some act of kindness or generosity, and make the aspiration, may the merit of this go to benefit my father. You can even specify it may give him the merit to find the Dhamma in whatever existence he may occur in. What aspects of morphogenetic fields, Sheldrake definition, apply most to Theravada practice? Yeah, that's actually a very interesting topic to talk about Rupert Sheldrake's theory of morphogenetic fields. I've often cited that in Dhamma talks as applying to the dependent origination, particularly. For those who are not familiar, Rupert Sheldrake is a kind of maverick biologist who says that the unfolding of forms of beings, like the development of organs and limbs and so on, is informed by information fields that exist as non-local pure information fields, which sounds very much like the Buddhist idea of mind as a generalized concept. Now, they're not located in space. They're outside of time in a sense, and they're just pure information. So it's a radical break with pure materialist science, and it explains a lot that's missing from the purely materialist explanation. And it ends up coming very close to Buddhist ideas of karma, for example, that the form of the being is determined by its past karma. And where is karma located? What is karma? It's non-local, it's outside of time, and it's pure information. For simplicity, is equanimity as a sankhara the absence of greed, aversion, and delusion? I would not really say that, because that would be, I mean, it's close to being correct, but that's absence of delusion is really wisdom, panya. Equanimity would be absence of greed and aversion. Is it necessary to experience both pleasant and unpleasant experiences to develop equanimity? I don't know if I'd say it's necessary, but it's kind of unavoidable. It's the nature of samsara. You're going to have pleasant and unpleasant experiences, and the practice is to how do you deal with them. It's not equanimity is not as a sankhara anyway, is not absence of pleasant and unpleasant experience, but not letting them affect the mind, remaining steady and in the middle. So we're getting up to the hour. I think we can call it for this session, and that concludes the session on the Bojjangas. And next week we'll be doing something different. I haven't decided on a topic yet, and we'll let you go. I'm just going to make one more comment here. I just saw a question: what is the right way to listen to a Dhamma talk? Should one take notes as in class? No, I would say not really. The best way to listen to a Dhamma talk is to open your mind and your heart and just let it sink in. You can with these recorded talks, you could always go back and go through them a second time and make notes afterwards. I think if there was material you really wanted to make notes of, that would be the way to do it. But if you taking notes, while it's going on, you're going to be kind of missing the essence. You're always going to be, your mind will always be a sentence or two behind the speaker. Okay, I'll leave you to it.